Welcome back to another lesson of the War Thunder School I started. This time, as promised, I'll be talking about BRs and ranks and what they even mean. And for that, I also made two example lineups. Because the thing with BRs and ranks the game doesn't make it very obvious what serves what function. And it gets really confusing because it honestly doesn't really make sense how it works. So if we were to click to better, you're probably already used to that, but the game then for it's open here, and you see how many players search for a match in the different ranks. This obviously, and also maybe coming from other tank games, may give you the idea that the matchmaker is bound to ranks, which is entirely wrong. In fact, the rank is completely non-influential on the matchmaking, which is why that's honestly stupid. That is why I made two lineups here. As you can see, this almost exclusively consists of 5.7 vehicles. I do have a 5.0 AA and a 5.3 tank destroyer, but that is simply because there isn't a 5.7 AA, and this is also a really good vehicle. Now, as you can see, we have the Tiger E here, right? And then we have the lineup that most German beginners probably will have, or people that first reach the Tiger. You have the Tiger E, you have the 8.8 centimeter flak, and so on and so forth. The only vehicle that's even remotely 5.7 is the Tiger tank, which happens a lot. Although usually the backup is something like a Panzer IV, sometimes a Panzer III, or worse. And if you look here at the top, it says ground realistic better, it's BR 5.7. We go back to example A. Again, different lineup, right? The only thing these two lineups have in common is the Tiger tank. And again, ground realistic better, it's BR 5.7. This means that these two lineups will get into the same matches. Now, this leads to the problem that ideally you should have a lineup that is mostly of the same BR. There are some vehicles that perform better at higher BRs, and especially the minor nations oftentimes do not have enough vehicles to fill up your lineup completely. But if you think about it, if you look at this lineup, right, your Tiger tank gets disabled. Everything else you have left in this lineup. Okay, to be honest, I didn't pick very good vehicles, but even if those were Panzer IV, Hetzer, etc., right, your lineup would still be vastly outclassed by everything you meet, even if you end up in a 5.7 match. Because that's another thing, the matchmaking, as we've already discussed, does not actually search by ranks, but by BR. So, as I just said, these two lineups will possibly get into the same matches. There's no difference in the matchmaking here. That means if your main tank, which in this case would be the Tiger, gets disabled, you're stuck with all of these vehicles against things like the Easy 8 Sherman, Jumbo Shermans, T-34 85s, and so on, because your lineup, the lineup of your opponents will consist of 5.7 vehicles. Now, you may wonder then what function does rank serve? Well, it is for research mainly, honestly. As you can see here, everything, the entire tech tree is sorted into ranks, going from 1 to 7 with tanks and so on and so forth. All this applies to all other vehicle classes, but there are differences in the game modes that I'll be talking about in a second. So if we go this example to China, because I haven't really played this, I can only research this, which is a bug. I shouldn't be able to research the M3A3, but if this was correct, I would only be able to research rank 1 vehicles, because if you look here, I need 5 out of these tanks to progress to the next rank. In this case, it happens to be all tanks of the rank, which is not always the case, which leads to people snaking into higher BRs, like Tigers as example. Because if you look at Germany, Germany has a very big tree, right? Here you would need, let me see, at China again, 6 tanks. Assuming this is the same for the Germans, right? You have 4 vehicles just in the most left flank here. So all you would have to do is research these 3 tank or 4 tank destroyers, the 2 Panzer IIIs here, and you could immediately get the Tiger tank. The problem here is now that you do not have anything to accompany it. So rank, first and foremost, limits research. Another thing it does, which is completely nonsensical because we just talked about how matchmaking works, is it also applies for event restrictions. Right now, as example, Operation Summer Quest is going, or how it's called, that I made another video about, and it is limited to rank 3 and above. Meaning that the same, by the way, applies to the Battle Pass. It's also rank 3 and above. This does mean in the end that you need rank 3 and above vehicles to make progress in events. But, which again makes no sense because that's not how you get matchmaked. And as you can see, the Wirbelwind as example is 3.7, and there are vehicles that go all the way down to 2.7 and 2.3 at rank 3. So this is an oversight or something of the sorts on Gaijin's part, because it does not prevent skilled players or experienced players from going into lobbyers, especially not after they just allowed event vehicles into the event again. Meaning that vehicles you've obtained in events can participate in this, but enough of that. So ideally, you want to progress linearly, so you don't want to rush down a line, but instead you want to make sure that you can make full lineups. For that, maybe some planning isn't bad. As example, in my last videos, I talked about the United States. I think the first good step to make is to get to 1.3 and then 2.7, and only start playing that BR once you actually have all those things, otherwise you will be outclassed again. The matchmaker doesn't care for the fact that some of your vehicles aren't competitive in the battles you will be thrown into, because, well, it sees it as your fault, so to speak. And this applies to the ground mode, it applies, or ground realistic, it applies to ground arcade, and it applies to air realistic. It does not apply that way to the air mode. It does apply to that to all Navy modes except EC again, because EC just doesn't have matchmaking. For EC, the matchmaker just collects enough players to actually throw them into one match. That's it. There are no restrictions on BRs or ranks. Then there's the simulator mode that you possibly don't even know about. It's hidden here. This rotates every few hours. I think it's 24 and specifically. And you have a set of vehicles that you can select, and those fight against another select set of vehicles. So you can make, for simulator, you can make your lineup out of everything you see here. Sometimes there's a very huge BR difference between them, but that's mostly fine. And of course, aircraft. I think this, yeah, here you see also the allowed aircraft for this. Here the aircraft are limited not by the list, but simply by BR. You are allowed to pick 1.7 to 2.7 in this one. And then there's another outlier, that is Air Arcade. For Air Arcade you have, let me see, I should have made a lineup for that, shouldn't I? Let's just pick this lineup, right? Let's just quickly remove the tanks. Because here it is actually not bad if you snake to a vehicle and have a higher BR vehicle. Because you can actually down tier your vehicles in Air Arcade if you have only one with you. As you can see, this is a 3.0 aircraft, an Air Arcade as well, right? It's labeled here as 3.0, but I would get into a 2.7 match. I have no idea why that is the case, it is just how arcade works. And I believe if you use other plans, this doesn't work anymore. But with just one plane, you can essentially force your higher BR plane into lower BR matches. That's really worth it, I'm not sure. Maybe if you want to grind out one specific aircraft, maybe if you're snaked. But this is an outlier to that. Otherwise it doesn't work like this at all. So otherwise it always takes the highest BR in your lineup and then finds a match for you based on that. Again, while it is a fair assumption, rank again doesn't matter for matchmaking the slightest. If you want to make an effective lineup, you should always see to first research other vehicles of that BR. As example, I do have a 9.3 tank, but that's it, I have one of it. So I should not play 9.3 with the Germans. As you see, I also don't have a 9.3 lineup for them. Because my 9.3 tank would be alone and I'd be ranked or matched against people that have full 9.3 lineups. This is also why especially Germany at 5.7 gets fucked sideways that hard, because a lot of people get attracted by the Tiger and then rush it down, and then that's it, they have the Tiger, but they do not have anything to accompany it with. Which is extremely important. Again, it ranks you at the BR of your highest vehicle, the matchmaker doesn't care for anything else. It might possibly care for your player level, but I have never seen any conclusive proof that this is actually the case. So as you can see here, it's 5.3 lineup. I have some lower BR vehicles in it because, in my opinion, the 109Z is the best plane I have here. So there isn't a point in taking my 5.3 vehicles. And again, 5.3 match. Here another example, I have a 5.0 vehicle in it. So you shouldn't force yourself to only use the BR that you want to play. So it is okay to have lower BR vehicles in your lineup because sometimes there just isn't another choice, right? As example, the Soviets just don't have a 5.7 AA. So in one way or another, I'm forced to use I could use a 5.3, but again, it would still not be a 5.7 AA. And especially minor nations have the issue that they just can't make full lineups at a lot of BRs. So you have to use some lower BR vehicles, which is okay. But this mostly works for light vehicles and not for heavy vehicles. And it is really important to keep in mind that every time you make a new lineup, always consider actually, I think the best thing is pick a vehicle you really want to play. As example, this entire lineup is built around the VK4501 because I didn't make this lineup because I wanted to play 5.3. I made this lineup because I wanted to play the VK. And then I picked some vehicles from the German tech tree that I think work well with this. And are in a similar BR range. Same if you start to research something. So let's say you really want the 105 Sherman, then you should probably also research the other 2.7 vehicles around it to accompany it. And that's pretty much it. There isn't really a lot more to say, because the thing with BRs and ranks is not that it's a lot, or that's convoluted or something like that, it just doesn't make sense, as you have maybe realized now as well. If there are any questions left open, I of course have to answer them. The only thing that is left to say is that everything that's labeled as a reserve tank and gets a lower spawn cost, and B, I think they can spawn multiple times in arcade. Now, the last thing you may probably wonder about is how matchmaking actually works in that case. Again, it takes your highest BR vehicle, it applies you onto 5.3, and then it searches for 4.3 and up to 6.3 matches to you. So if you take a 5.3 lineup, you can face 4.3 tanks at best, and at worst you can fight 6.3. A match can at most have a maximum difference of a BR of 1. So the people with the lowest BR lineups will be, as example, 5.3 and the highest 6.3. You will not have a 4.3 to 6.3 match. It's exactly one BR point that can be matched against. And that's it. Thank you for listening. Again, if there are any questions left, I answer them in the comments, and otherwise see you on the next lesson, and goodbye.